fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. I hope you're having a wonderful, kick-ass day. I'm really excited for today's conversation because I'm speaking to the owner and CEO of Idea Health and Fitness Association, Amy Boone Thompson. Amy Boone Thompson, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you today. We've been trying to do this for a long time, so I'm excited it's happening.
I'm such a big fan of Idea. I love the conferences. I love the work you do on behalf of the fitness industry. And I'm just so glad that you're running the ship these days, which we're going to talk about in a second. But I know you're a busy person, so I just want to say thank you for doing this. I think having your voice in this podcast means a lot to me because of the work you do at Idea, and because we're an industry that often is young and in need of leadership as an industry, and the fact that that's the role that you're in right now is very exciting because I think we need it now more than ever. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah. So for starters, for people who don't know what Idea Health and Fitness Association is, you just start by saying a little bit about what is Idea, and then we'll talk a little bit about your role and your recently changing role at the organization.
I'd love to. So Idea is celebrating its 40th anniversary as an association. And really, we are a lot of things. We provide business resources for fit pros and business owners. We have, for example, like liability insurance, health insurance. We are a media company. So we produce Idea Fitness Journal. We have a business newsletter. We have all kinds of really curated content that we seek out the industry's leading minds, and we vet all of our content, and then we get it CEC approved. So for people who need CECs, it's approved by 25 plus agencies. And we are also an event company. So we have two global events. One is called Idea Personal Trainer Institute, and one is the Idea World Convention, and both are held annually. So that's a little bit about who Idea has been in the past.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And listeners, if you're not following Idea, if you've not been to the conferences, go. I've been to them. I spoke at one. Mark and Pete and Ben, I think, have all been to them before. And so go check them out. They really do put out high quality content, and their events are very well produced, very well organized. So thank you for that. And Amy, recently you went from running the business as the CEO for, I think, last 3 years, and now you're the owner of the business. So can you just talk me a little through how did that transition happen for you?
Yeah, that's right. So for starters, just for your audience's benefit, I'm a lifer in the fitness industry. So I like to say that I've held every single role that exists, from being a floor trainer, folding towels. I was a massage therapist. I ran basketball leagues. I've been a GM. I've actually owned my own yoga studio, brick and mortar, in La Jolla, California. And so all of those experiences had always, like, the common thread in my career has been that I am passionate for advocating for fitness professionals and business owners so we can have long-lasting careers and ultimately reach more people. So all that said, all of those experiences kind of positioned me as they actually called me a unicorn, Michael, when I was found for this role. They said, "We've been looking for you. You are the unicorn we've been looking for." Because of all those experience I had, It prepared me to really lead this organization. So at the time, this was before the pandemic, I stepped in 2019 to lead Idea. And we were owned by a private equity group. During the pandemic, we changed ownerships. We were sold as part of a large catalog of brands to a new owner. And, through the pandemic, a lot changed. And of course, businesses were trying to limit their resources and be as careful and mindful as possible. And through that time, I could see that we were the only pro-facing brand. We were the only B2B business that sat in the portfolio. And ultimately, we were probably not going to be getting the resources that we needed to evolve because a lot of the resource was going to the consumer-facing brands and publications. And so it came to the point to have the conversation about what's next for Idea. And I literally jumped out of my chair and said, "It's me. It's always been me. I want to buy this business."
Amazing.
And they worked with me. And so, really grateful for the individuals that owned IDEA for really trusting me with its future.
Yeah. Congratulations. That's so
Thank
exciting
you.
to
Thank
have
you.
leadership and organization, an association, a membership organization like IDEA, to have someone at the top who both owns it and is running it that really gets what life is like for your members is so critical. So congratulations to you. That's so thrilling. So let's. And also, I didn't know that you were a massage therapist. I was a massage
Yeah.
therapist too. So we should share stories at some point. Um, so I want to kind of take advantage of the fact that you kind of, part of your job these days is to have your finger on the pulse of what's happening in fitness facilities around the country these days. And I'm just curious to get your perspective on how you see brick and mortar gyms recovering, quote, recovering from COVID. We're not fully out of the woods by any means. It's kind of part of our new normal to be continually dealing with COVID. As many of our listeners I know tell us all the time, is they still have a lot of call outs and staffing issues and hiring issues. But I'm curious from your vantage point, how are you seeing gyms recover in this quote post COVID period? How's everyone doing?
Yeah, so we listen to our membership, we hear what's important to them, what's working, what's not working. And I did want to address the hiring challenges that companies are having. One, at our world event this summer, we saw more new people to the industry and new people to our event than we had seen pre-pandemic. So that's exciting that
Wow.
new people are coming into the industry. So I just want to give people hope that we are seeing new people who are trying to get upskilled and trying to grow businesses in our space. Um, but I think a pitfall that we might fall into as operators is that we may fall victim to kind of lowering our professional standards as we look for staff. The old saying is find someone with a pulse who can be on your fitness floor and address the members and et cetera, et cetera. But I worry for our industry if we reduce our standards and lower our hiring professional requirements, that's going to take us further and further from being deemed essential and a real critical part of the medical health continuum. So that's something that I just would encourage owners to keep your standards high. Hire for, especially fitness professionals, your personal trainers, your instructors. There are minimal qualifications those individuals need to be working with your members, and we want to make sure we don't lower those standards in this time when you might feel a little desperation.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think, it goes back to the idea that we're still a relatively young industry and
Mm-hmm.
still creating standards about how do people get in? What are the minimum requirements for people's education to be a trainer, instructor, et cetera?
Yeah,
And the fact that during this time when it's hard to find staff, that people are sometimes willing to go outside of those standards. And I think to your point, it's really well taken, is that if we want to be taken seriously as an industry and be deemed essential, should there be another reason for us to advocate for ourselves in that way?
yeah,
Hopefully not, but there probably will be.
yeah,
That it's really important that we have some rigor to how our industry works. I think that's an important message. So thank you for that.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and then really, we know that some of the blessings that came out of the pandemic are that now virtual or online fitness is widely accepted. And I think that sometimes operators have been a little intimidated by that. Maybe you tried virtual fitness and it was great while we were closed, but now that you're reopened, you're really trying to get people back or seeing people come back. But I think one thing I would just remind the entire industry about is that one of the blessings is that we are no longer restricted by zip codes or by walls. And what I mean by that is, you can grow your membership using some of this tech. You can grow your membership outside of your walls and outside of your geography by really starting to think about the different ways you could leverage either professionals that are creating content or you yourself creating an online community that will connect your members between their visits to the club. So we're seeing more and more people get creative with these virtual platforms, and they keep challenging both pros and business owners to say, okay, what does this mean for me? How can
Mhm.
we think about our membership a little differently and create more community and engagement using this technology?
Yeah. Well, yeah, well said, Amy. I want to ask you some follow-ups on that one because we've done something very similar at Mark Fisher Fitness. We had to, being in New York City, as of March 2020, we're shut down for what, nearly almost 18 months. I forget how long it was, but we pivoted online and created an online workout experience that still exists today and is kind of still part of our membership. And it's for people who both come in person, who want some extra visits when they're not in person, and it's for some people who are never coming back in person, who just want to be online. And one of the things that we've learned, through a lot of trial and error during COVID, is that running a kind of online community when your experience has been brick and mortar is a whole nother bag of chips. It requires a whole another kind of tool belt of skills and abilities and knowledge. So when you think about, all of our listeners who've been brick and mortar owners leveling up to really be successful at creating an online community, what are the kind of areas where you think they really need to level up in? What are the skill sets they need to acquire?
Yeah. Yeah, and we've been trying to bring a lot of this training and education. We actually have a certificate for online training
Great.
professionals, but yeah, so we know that quality is going to be important. We know consistency is important, but really finding the pros that thrive with a camera.
Mm,
Teaching to a camera and creating connection is very different than teaching to an in-person classroom. And so finding the right professionals who are able to connect via the camera, finding the right angles for them. And then we go into a lot of coaching about how to keep the person interested and engaged through the workout so they feel like they're the only person you're coaching. When they're in their living room, taking your class, they're by themselves. And so you really want to find ways to make that connection through the camera. So those are some of the things, but it's not for every fitness professional. And so I think now that a lot of pros had a chance to dabble in it and see if it was for them or not, the ones who are staying in the space are upskilling and incredibly professional and learning new ways to engage their communities. I was going to say, though, some of our studio owners are actually converting small spaces of their studio
mhm.
into these online on demand kinds of classes. So they are recorded, but they'll offer them still as live classes to their membership. And then they'll let the trainers use that space for the times when they're not running a class. So as a trainer, I can expand my business as well. I can work for that studio, but I can pop into that virtual room and I can train my clients anywhere in the world doing it through my employer at the studio. So that's something we're seeing as well.
Yeah, that's it. I think those are some creative ideas. I've seen a lot of people converting little spaces into live studios, or just bringing live cameras into existing live classes and having some people remote. I think it's so fun. And you're right; it gives us as brick and mortar owners just access to the whole globe, right?
Yes.
And I will say the first point you pointed to, which is find trainers who are really great on camera, who actually like being on camera. And I literally just had a podcast episode 2 episodes ago with, I don't know if you know, Mason Bendewald, who was one of the directors of the P90X series. And so he's been directing trainers on camera maybe longer than anyone else. And I just did a podcast with him and he gave a bunch of really amazing tips for how to be effective as a trainer in front of a camera. And that skill is just more important now than ever for people looking to make this transition. So maybe that's just a quick internal pitch to your listeners is, one,
Yeah.
go check out that podcast. And two, go check out the course that Amy mentioned. That's a certification for online training. So there'll be a lot more for you to learn if you want to grow your online business.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to check that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good one. Let me ask you this. Is it okay if we pivot a little bit? I want to talk about the same
Yeah.
topic, just a different angle, because there's hiring right now it can be tough in a lot of markets, especially for trainers and instructors. And so we talked about that, and we talked about not lowering our standards, which I think is important, really critical. We also talked about expanding online, so finding trainers who maybe have camera experience, want to build an online brand. But the other side of this that I think I want to make sure we take some time to talk about is a lot of people during what we're calling this the Great Resignation are not going back to work for employers because the number one reason the research is showing is because of a toxic work environment. Right, the number one reason people left jobs during COVID was that the culture itself was not one in which they felt like they were thriving. as a human. And the number one thing contributing to a so-called toxic work culture is our bad managers. That people who managed them every single day were not people they felt like really were supportive. They didn't create a great environment of learning. They didn't make it a safe space to fail. They didn't feel like they're being invested in as employees. So I'd love to hear a little bit, because you have experience doing all of this. What are some thoughts you have for our listeners who want to make sure that if they're going to hire, that they're still hiring, that they're the best manager and leader they can be, to have talent that sticks around and really values a workplace that is one that embraces them and helps them develop? So
Yeah.
I know that's a big question, but let me just start with, like, what tips do you have for people who just want to become better managers and and create a better workplace culture?
Yeah. Well, for me as a leader, it always came back to being incredibly authentic and remembering that every person you're working with is a human being. So you want to treat them holistically. And so the way that shows up in business or in our gyms is really taking the time to understand the individuals and the individual needs and what are their motivations and their aspirations, and how are you going to be part of their career and
Mm,
continuum, right? What is it they can learn from you and your business and your organization for whatever period of time they're there, and what is it that you can learn from them? Because these are truly, having an employee it's a partnership. They're choosing you, no different than you're choosing them. So while you're invested in each other, what are the ways that each of you can benefit? And then be authentic as a leader about investing in your people, listening to their needs, and and then really finding ways to that both benefit. Trainer or Fit Pro benefits, business benefits for whatever period of time they're going to be working with you.
yeah, yeah, well said, Amy. I think that's really a great way to think about it, listeners, is that it's a partnership. And
Yeah.
ideally, the way you describe it here, it's a win-win partnership where you benefit from each other's existence and support, that you learn from each other. It's not just a one-way street. And I love your emphasis on authenticity there. I think one of the things that I see, at least in my experience working with gym owners, when it comes to authenticity, that they leave on the tables, they're a little afraid to be vulnerable as a leader, a little afraid to be vulnerable as a manager, that they keep their cards a little close to their chest, and they only show the good parts of themselves. And I think if you're going to really embrace authenticity in the way I'm hearing you talk about it, Amy, I just want to say it feels important to share the good times and the bad. It feels important to share when you're very certain about a decision you're making as a leader, and when you're very uncertain about a decision you're making as a leader. That kind of authenticity, which requires vulnerability, I think is a faster path to trust
Yeah.
than just
Yeah.
talking about the good stuff. Yeah.
I agree. And with that transparency, and so I think, as business owners, really including your team in business decisions to the extent that you can. Naturally, there are going to be filters that you need to have. However, if you're making decisions that impact people's livelihood or their career trajectory, be transparent about how those decisions came to be. And whenever possible, include your team in those decisions
Mm,
so that they can put themselves in the seat of an owner and really start to understand why some of these decisions came to be. A lot of our pros aspire to own their own studios as well. So again, benefit from each other and educate these professionals on what these business decisions are that you're making, but truly understanding how they impact your people.
yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. We'll add those to the list. Important to have some transparency, important to include them and get buy-in along the way. Teach them how you think as an owner so they can learn to help you with the business more and more. And as you said, many of them are aspiring owners one day. So it's a real win-win situation. I love that. Let's pivot one last time here. And I want to get to, you mentioned early on, when you're talking about the landscape of all your membership, you said that, you're trying to keep your finger on the pulse of all the things that are working for them right now, all the things that are not working for them right now. I want to go back to the things that you see are working. So when you think
Yeah.
about interactions you've had with your members recently, what are the things they're doing in their studios that are really working well right now from any angle?
Yeah, so we're seeing, again, going to this treating our members holistically, we are seeing that recovery centers are popping up more and more. And there's a lot of different iterations of recovery in clubs. So
Mm,
some facilities are really just using their recovery tools or resources with a professional. Others have created entire centers that could be accessed, paid, or for the membership. So, but recovery can be a lot of different things. And
mm,
as we continue to um, become mental health first responders, because we're the people who are recognizing and seeing changes in our clients, we are first responders. So I put recovery and mental health and this holistic, addressing holistic wellness kind of together.
mm,
Is, how are we as operators identifying and being, just having our a different intention, right, to showing up to a gym. It's not just about hard bodies anymore. It's not just about the bikini, whatever that this industry was built on. It's now about really understanding that we are affecting the entire human being, and how do we as professionals and owners create a safe space that's inclusive, and that where we are in tune to notice changes in our members and have a team of allied health professionals to point to when we identify people might be in crisis.
yeah, yeah, well said. And it's a change that I've been in the industry now for over a decade, I've seen that change coming and coming and coming and coming. And I think COVID really pushed that there really is a focus on fitness being the kind of the first responders, first line of defense to healthcare in this country, including mental health.
Yes.
And while I think there's a lot for us to iron out in terms of our scope of practice when it comes to
Right.
those mandates, that there's something to be said by default we are those things. So how do we make the most of the position we're in? And I think it can be beneficial both for our clients and the business to think about how to respond to the position we find ourselves in. But can you just maybe share a little bit more ideas about how are you seeing people do that well? So if, let's just say I am a listener listening to this conversation and I hear, yes, actually, I think we should be more aware of like the mental health of our clients and have a team of people that can help them and try and think about wellness in our space more holistically. But where do I start? What does that look like? Can you maybe just paint a picture of some things
Yeah.
you see that have been going well for operators?
Yeah, well, first is addressing that these are things we want to be mindful of, right? So you're exactly right about scope of practice, and I don't suggest that we're treating or that we're going out of bounds with what we can do as professionals. But
Of
if
course.
you're educating your team about how to recognize signs and symptoms, they're doing this really well in the collegiate space right now, and so
Mm,
ideas got our ear to, what are they're creating these, it's actually called mental health first aid, I believe, which is a credential that a fitness professional can layer onto their expertise, where they can identify when someone might need help or when someone's looking for some support or struggling. And then, so first educating your team about, hey, this is something we want to be aware of, and maybe discussing in your team meetings, like, what are some things that we might notice or that we might see, and then giving them tools and resources. And so I use this term, these allied health professionals, but who are the
mm,
people in your community, the professionals that your team has at their disposal that they can reach out to. And then, of course, being careful, we want to protect privacy of our members, and there's a lot of layers to that as an owner that you want to be aware of. But what can we do? Not necessarily what can't we do, but what can we do when we see something, we need to say something, and what are the ways we can educate our team to help?
yeah, I think that's a great way of thinking about it, Amy. Just the idea that we're just raising awareness and mindfulness on our team about how to notice and name the signs and symptoms of people that might be struggling with mental health or other kinds of ailments. That and then having some resources to refer them to, and really just having your team be practiced at that. Because I know for a lot of team members that can be a difficult or really yeah, really hard conversation to have with a client is to make a referral to a mental
Yeah,
health professional or even a physical therapist. Sometimes it's hard to say, you really need some help that we can't provide here. Let me help you.
right.
So I think it's a great way of thinking about it.
Yeah,
And I love that there's a growing number of certifications for this
yeah.
kind of thing.
It's true. And Michael, it also applies to your own staff. So I think that's
Hmm.
where it starts. Like if we're caring for our own employees and our own teammates, then we always want to start there to take care of our own. And if you
Mm.
recognize that a teammate is struggling, then how do we help them? So again, these are ways that we're seeing our industry evolve to addressing humans holistically and creating more inclusive spaces, but also really being having an intention that someone's mental health is part of their overall wellness, and
Mm.
that's how we're seeing the industry evolve in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful addition. The idea that, we can also as leaders start by modeling this for our teams,
Mhm.
in our buildings to make sure that they feel seen and heard with, more holistically as a human coming into our
Yeah.
space and not just an employee. Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I want to start to wrap things up. I know we can keep
Yeah.
talking all day and I have like 900 more questions I want to ask. So I'll have to have you back, Amy. But I'm just curious if I had, this is a big question, so feel free to sit with it for a second. But for a lot of our listeners, we're coming towards the end of this year. They're going to start doing some planning and some goal setting for 2023, looking ahead. And I'm just curious, if you owned a gym these days, if you owned a brick and mortar studio, what kind of projects, what kind of investments are you going to be looking to make in the next year or so to make sure that your gym is on track to continue thriving? Where would you be making investments right now if you were a gym owner?
Yeah, great question. So first, I know when we do our strategic planning, we're always looking at our revenue lines. How do we grow membership? How do we grow ancillary revenues? How do we bring more people to our gym? Um, because I always sat in the programming space for the most part, outside of being an owner, like my mind always goes to how do we create more community? And
Mm.
how do you get more visits from your members? How do you get that stickiness built by building culture? And it starts with the right people who are all on board with your vision. So part of your strategic plan for 2023 is investing into your team so that they feel cared for, heard, listened, loved. Then they care for, listen, hear your members. That leads to more visits, that leads to more success, more results, and more ultimately more engagement. So I would be looking to how are the ways that we can foster community, starting with our own team, extending out to the membership, and then from a pure, like, what's new? What should we be thinking of? Really go back to your facility, survey your members, survey your team. What would round out your offerings? What are they asking for? Are they seeing anything, without getting too trendy? Are they seeing anything at other facilities that they'd really like to see more of? Or less of. Maybe you could replace a format or a program or equipment with something else to just bring excitement and keep it fresh. So those are some tips that I would offer to owners as you're going through the strategic process.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, invest in community. It's always going to benefit you. Invest in your staff, having them. I love the way you said it. Having them feel seen and heard means they're going to help your clients feel seen and heard, which means people stick around longer and invite their friends. Yeah, and so that's a fantastic tip. And the second one is go find out what your clients want. What do they want more of? What do they want less of? They will tell you if you ask. Sometimes they'll tell you more than you even bargained for if
That's
you
right.
ask, but go be in dialogue with their community and ask what they need. I think that's a great way, two great tips leading into planning for next year. So to wrap things up, Amy, anything coming up at IDEA that you want to let our listeners know about? What's coming up towards the end? By the time this airs, December of this year or Q1 of next year. What's around the corner?
Yeah, well, save the dates for the events. Our East Coast event is in Alexandria, Virginia, and that is Personal Trainer Institute. It's a smaller event. We see about 650 people. Actually, Mark Fisher keynoted my first year in this role.
Amazing.
Um, and it is a fantastic event with really seasoned professionals and business owners. So here you're going to interact with other studio owners and professionals who've been in the industry for many, many years. We bring in the latest science and all of the business that you need, and really give you a great venue to share ideas. Then World is in July, and World is in Los Angeles this year. It is
Great.
July 12th through the 16th. We love this venue. We typically get about 10,000 Fit Pros and about 300 businesses that come to the Fitness and Wellness Expo. So please put this in your strategic plan, budget for it. Come yourself, bring your team. You will not regret it. You will leave inspired. You will leave refreshed. You will get all the latest and greatest from around the world of what's happening in fitness and wellness. So that's a must attend. And then lastly, check out ideafit.com. We're producing the most content in the world. And again, it's all vetted, peer reviewed, and CEC approved content for you or for your teams on running businesses, on everything you need to know from a professional standpoint or from an operator's standpoint.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, Amy Boone Thompson, thank you so much for doing this. This has been a great conversation. Again, I will have to have you back because there's more topics for us to cover. And listeners, go write all those dates down when you do your annual planning, because I think we're even trying to get some of our Unicorn Society members to come and align our retreat dates with some of the IDEA conferences next year. So we're going to try and be there as well. And listeners, if you're listening to this, we probably are still have open enrollment right now for Unicorn Society. So if you want to join us in 2023, we'll remind you as you become a Unicorn Society member to go to the IDEA conferences because we'll probably be there. And so thank you for this conversation, Amy. I really appreciate it. And dear listeners, go have a wonderful day. I'll see you on the next one. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.